Hello again, precious friends. I am so happy to be back talking to you again. Thank you all for your patience. I have good news on the job front. My schedule situation is sorted out with my boss. He actually even apologized to me, which was nice, really nice. So all of you who've been following along in that regard will be happy to know I will be having time and energy to devote to posting regular cooking videos again. So here we go. As promised so long ago, finally, carnivore chips. Did you ever want to just eat chips for dinner? Thought, oh, I just want to sit down and eat chips and dip until I'm full and go, yeah, that was my dinner. Well, I'm here to tell you, my precious friends, now you can. Amazing. So, carnivore chips and dips. Let's begin, as we always do, with our hardware. We got over here our cooktop, of course. My bossy Mr. Cooktop, who yells at me when I do something wrong, which is just fine because, you know, it's an electronic device and I don't get along with those very well. But we're going to need a nonstick skillet along with whatever cooktop you're using. This is about a 6 3/4 inch cooking surface. It's technically an 8-inch skillet, but as we've talked about before, the important part is the cooking surface. As we went over before, they measure the skillet by edge to edge at the top of the flare. So when you're talking about how big you want your skillet, you want to talk about the cooking surface, and you measure that by measuring the back of the pan. So this is a 6.5 inch skillet, and I use that because I find it a convenient way to make the egg crepes, or whatever you want to call them, that become the chips. Okay, you can use whatever size of pan you want, but you just have to make sure that once you see the procedure that you can handle the pan adequately. Okay, next is we're going to need a stick blender. You can do this in a regular jar blender if you want to. I just find this less messy and more convenient. We are going to need whatever kind of vessel you want to use to blend in. This is just an old baseball stadium plastic beer cup from the Oakland days, because I used to live in Oakland and I've always been an Oakland A's fan. But yeah, I know you don't need to tell me they're not doing very well this year. But anyhow, we also have a device with which to dose out our batter, which I'm going to be using this, and right now it has the water for our recipe in it. And we're going to need our ubiquitous, of course, silicone spatula, which I always have handy. And so the universe does not end, I have to forget one thing in my prep, and a pastry brush for lubing up our pan when we get started. Okay, oh yes, and also a cooling rack onto which to dismount our crepes. Okay, that's our hardware. And now, precious friends, software. Our ingredients. We have the aforementioned water. This is 12 ounces of water, 1.5 cups of water. We have 2 whole eggs, okay, which I'm just going to go ahead and put right in here to get started, as well as I'm putting some of the water in here. I'm putting about half the water in here because if I put all the water into this container, when I put the blender in it, the level of the liquid comes up too high and it splashes. We'll put the rest of the water in later after it's all blended. We also have 4 tablespoons of unflavored gelatin. You can use whatever kind you want. You can use the regular, you can use Knox brand, you can use the regular generic kind that you buy at the place that starts with W and ends with Mart. You can use grass-fed beef gelatin if you're eating really clean. Any kind, you can use fish gelatin as far as I'm concerned. Any kind of gelatin powder will work, not collagen. Friends, please listen. Do not use collagen powder or collagen peptide powder for this. It doesn't work, okay? That's it. It's got to be gelatin. Any kind of gelatin, but it's got to be gelatin. There you go. Oh, and I need something to stir this with. You don't want to let that sitting there on top of the liquid like that. And we have also, just because I think it cuts down the eggy taste, this is a little bit of monk fruit liquid sweetener. You can leave this out if you want to. I just think it offsets the eggy taste and makes the crackers taste more neutral, or the chips taste more neutral. And just a teeniest, tiniest little squirt that I can manage. And here is a half a cup of egg white powder. Okay. Now we're just going to put this in. And we're going to stir it until it gets wet. It won't stir in evenly, but that's okay. That's why we are using the blender, because it needs to be beaten up a little bit. But don't put the blender down in here. We've worked with egg white powder before. Oh, we're going to have to put more water in here. Don't put your blender in on top of loose egg white powder. Please, precious friends, don't. You will have a cloud, and it is not the sort of thing you want to inhale. Now, we're going to put this down in here. And again, I like this stick blender. It's really efficient, but it is loud and obnoxious sounding. Oh, and our last ingredient is 1/4 cup plus about a tablespoon of melted butter, or this is ghee. You can use melted butter, you can use clarified butter, you can use ghee, any of the three, but we're going to put that in a little bit. So here we go. This one has 2 speeds, and I'm just using the low speed just to make sure everything is blended. I'm going to scrape down the sides where some of the egg white powder may have stuck. When you're using a stick blender, you might want to start at the bottom and then raise it a little bit and then lower it a little bit a couple of times, because that makes sure that you get everything through the blades of the blender. Okay, now that we have that taken care of, now we're going to add about 1/4 cup of this melted butter. And we're going to drizzle it in slow while we run the blender. About a tablespoon, maybe a little bit less, in the container, because we're going to use that later on. until all of that melted butter is emulsified. You don't want anything floating on top. Now that everything is blended and emulsified, we're going to add the remainder of our water. Just give it a little shot to make sure everything is finally blended. And, precious friends, there we have our batter. And we're going to get rid of our messy blender stick. And we're going to pour our batter into our dosing vessel. I'm not going to pour it all in yet because it won't all go in. If you fill this particular vessel too full, the spout doesn't work properly, I've found. So we're going to straighten up a little bit, just for convenience. Now, this remaining ghee, come on camera stand, turn around, is going to be for lubricating our lovely pan. So we're going to turn on our Bossy cooktop. And we don't want this to be too hot. I've heard people say that the pan needs to be nice and hot in order for this to work properly. But I have found that I like it to be a little cooler. I find it easier to dose out the batter and keep it consistent and relatively thin. So we're going to put it on 600 power. Not that that applies to you, but I'm going to set this to 340 and see how that goes. Last time I made this, I made it on my regular cooktop, which I probably should have made it over here so I would have known how to tell you to set it. But realistically, probably what my cooktop says probably has nothing to do with how you're going to want to set your cooktop. You just gotta give it a shot and see how it goes, basically. There we go. So we're going to let this heat up, and while that's heating, I'm just going to give it a little dose of ghee. I mean, there has been some ongoing concern and debate over whether one should use Teflon cookware. You know, I've been using it for years, and I have not noticed any detriment to my health because of it. I find that I'm meeting my health goals with Carnivore. So, you know, could I be better without it? Oh, maybe. But, you know, you do you. You could do this on a well-seasoned cast iron skillet as well. You could do this on a well-seasoned carbon steel crepe pan as well. But those are a little more difficult to come by and a little more difficult to maintain than okay, we're getting some heat now, and I'm going to back the power off a little bit. Now I'm going to pick the pan up off of the cooking surface, and Mr. Bossy Cooktop is going to yell at me. But now that our pan is hot, I'm going to dose out probably about 1/4 cup of our batter. I'm going to give it a stir first. I'm going to stir it between each dosing. And I'm going to pour it in. I'm going to swirl it around. Now, you may have noticed that the more you swirl it, the more uneven it gets, which is interesting, but that's why I like the pan to be less hot. The batter sets less quickly, and it's easier to shake the pan around and get it a consistent, you know, get it to be... What are you doing? I don't know why my cooktop turned off. That was weird. My cooktop turned itself off, and I do not know why. Well, we will see. I'll turn it back on again. I have it set to 320. Anyway, we'll go forward. Now, when the edges of the crepe start to lift away from the sides of the pan, and the top of the crepe is more or less dry, it's time to flip. There you go. Any of you who saw me do my carnivore noodles episode, we're going to do a similar thing with that. We're going to cook it on one side, and then we're going to cook it on the next side, and then we're going to flip it back to the first side again to dry it out a little bit. Because it's easier to... you hear the sizzle? We're just going to cook it on the first side again until the sizzle backs off and abates some. Okay, the sizzling has backed off. There we go. Boink! They don't need to be brown. All right, here we go. One more time. I'm going to lift it off. It's going to yell at me. This is between 1/3 and 1/4 of a cup. There we go. And because we're not serving these as crepes, we're going to cut them up. So if they're not perfectly round, don't worry about that. You're much better off just trying to make sure that your the thickness of your batter is uniform. And once this has cooled off a little bit, is not piping hot anymore, you can just kind of roll it up to get it out of the way and create more room for your next crepe. Now see, the edges are rolling back from the edges of the pan. There we go. Flip. Yeah, there's a little browning there. That's fine. They don't have to be brown, but it's not bad for them to be brown. It's fine. Sometimes they have little bubbles. That's fine. When the little bubbles come up, actually, that's when you know it's cooked, because that means the hot air is forming inside. Okay. I didn't grease the pan in between. Didn't need it this time. But this is a pan in really good shape. So it only needs to be oiled like every other time. One last time. Ooh, the pan's a little hot. Did you see the bubbling? That's a little hotter than I prefer. So I'm going to back the heat off back actually to 300. That's okay. It's going to make a funny looking crepe, but it's okay. It's going to be fine. Just back your heat off, and if you have one that looks like that, whatever. It still works. Actually, I'm kind of glad that happened, because now you know if that happens, don't worry about it. So for this pan, I'm guessing it's going to be between 1/4 and 1/3 of a cup dosed out for each crepe. Oops. There we go. I'm going to turn it down even more. This is really, I think it looks kind of cool, frankly, but like I said, it's not a big deal. It's not optimal, but if you have a couple that are like this, it's not that big a deal. And offload onto the rack. So, precious friends, I'm going to continue making these crepes until we have used up all the batter. I'm guessing I'm probably going to get about 10 of these from the batch of that I made, the batch of batter that I made. And I'm going to see you back here in just a few minutes once I have finished all of my little crepes. See you in a bit. Here we are again, precious friends. Okay, we have all of our crepes made. You can eat them like this. You can use these as sandwich wraps. These also, you can cut them up for noodles like we talked about in the last video. These are a little bit different than the ones that we made last time in our noodle video. Because I found out that the chicken flour, it makes them very sturdy for things like soup and casseroles and the carnivore hamburger helper that we made. But for these, the chicken flour creates kind of an unpleasant texture. So we left the chicken flour out with these. So here are our crepes. I guess they're the closest thing you can call them. Oh, by the way, I do want to say you can see my vessels that I was using for the batter in the back filled with water. Please, if you're going to make this recipe, don't let the batter sit and dry on those things, because it turns into like dried paint. It takes forever to soak it off. So just get it rinsed out, soaked and rinsed out as soon as you can after. Just an easy hint to make your life more convenient. Okay, so we're gonna get started again. For this next stage, we're gonna make the chips. And what we're gonna need is we're gonna need a couple of sheet pans lined with parchment. You can do it without any parchment, but I just like the insurance of parchment. And we are going to brush this with ghee. You don't need a lot. We're going to do and you don't need to be fussy about it if there's a couple of little spots. You know, it's not like you're greasing for a cake that's going to stick. So, now, turn. What we're going to do now is we've got our crepes, and oops, I gotta melt this down again. Give me a sec. More ghee. You can use any kind of fat for this that you want to, but we are going to butter, lubricate up our crepes. And we're not going to butter both sides. I don't think we really need to. We just do one side, and because we put a decent amount of butter inside them already. And then we just butter one side. We stack them up and butter them. I did end up getting, I think, 13 crepes out of that batch of batter. How much you get out of your batch has, of course, everything to do with how thick you make them. So we stack them up and butter them, and that way the butter that's on the top of the other crepe helps butter the bottom of the crepe you put on top of it. And then we're going to turn the whole stack over and butter the bottom. That way both sides of all the crepes get buttered. That's not the whole bunch of them, but we're just gonna do one stack right now. So how we turn them into chips. You can cut them in quarters, or rather eighths, and turn them into like tortilla chip shapes. Or you can, what I have been doing is doing it this way. Just cut it in half. Cut the stack in half. Okay? And then the last ones I did were a little bit bigger. I'm just going to cut them in tortilla chip shapes. I'm going to cut them in 6. But you can cut them in squares if that's what you want to do. Doesn't really matter how you cut them. I'm just going to do them this way for right now because it's easy. There. Now, once you have them cut however you want to cut them, you just lay them on the sheet tray, and we have, you can actually set them really close together because they don't get bigger. They don't rise or anything like a cookie would. So you can actually put them as close together as you can manage. If they're squares, they're a little bit easier, obviously. There, that's one. You can use a bigger sheet pan. I have bigger sheet pans, but I have these pre-cut parchment sheets that fit these littler pans. So that's just more convenient for me to use rather than cutting. But you can use any size of pan you want. Looks like I have some more room. Hang on a second. Let me get some more melted ghee. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. I got me some more. This one I already cut in half. Got me some more melted butter. See, here's another one. Here's another one of them lacy ones. Okay, that should be plenty. Okay. Straighten up. Here we go. You can put them, lay them on here any old way you want to. There. And these are going to go now into a preheated 350-degree oven. Right back there. And depending on how thick they are, they're going to stay in there between 15 to 25 minutes. I'm guessing the thickness of these is going to be about 20 minutes. So I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes and then I'm going to check. And then if they're not quite done yet, then I'm going to let them go a little bit longer. But you'll want to set your timer probably to about 15 minutes and then check them. So I'm going to do that and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. We're back, dear friends. And look at this here. It ended up taking 20 minutes, but look how they're crisp. And as soon as they come out, we're going to sprinkle one batch with some Parmesan and garlic and herb. We want them to still be hot and still have the ghee that we sprinkled on them kind of still wet, so it'll stick to them a little bit. Looky there. Oh my goodness. There we go. This is just some grated Parmesan cheese with a little bit of dried oregano, dried parsley, and garlic powder. I didn't put any salt in because the Parmesan is salty enough. There is one. Right. And now we have another batch, and this batch is going to have, this is cinnamon and allulose, powdered allulose or granulated allulose. And we're just going to give that a decent dose. Toss them around. Yummy, yummy. You can hear how crispy they are. There is nothing uncrispy about these, honestly. There they are. Let me move this sheet pan out of the way. And I promised you dip, didn't I? Well, here we are for our Parmesan and herb and garlic. Look how this one blew up. Isn't that cute? We have, this is just some Greek yogurt, full-fat Greek yogurt with a little bit of softened goat cheese and some dill and lemon juice and a little bit of grated shallot. I just grated a piece of shallot on my, about a teaspoonful on my microplane grater and stirred it in here. And so chips and dip, my friends. Legit. I'll post the recipes for the dips in the description box. They're really easy. It's just dump it all in a bowl and stir. So they're not much in the way of instructions. So you should do fine with just an ingredient list. And here we have cinnamon sugar. Kind of like those things that you get at that place that calls itself Mexican food, that starts with a T and ends in a bell. But these you can actually eat without fearing for your health. And here I have some chocolate whipped cream to dip. It's just heavy whipping cream, obviously, a little bit of vanilla, whatever kind of calorie-free sweetener you like, or no sweetener at all if you don't want to. And just whipped up, and a little bit of cocoa powder. Just whipped up. If you're a person who can enjoy a sweet treat every now and then, here you don't have to look at my dirty sink. I hope you can hear how crunchy they are. Listen. Precious friends, if you've been missing crunchiness, I got you. I could sit here and eat this whole thing. Remember? I said, did you ever feel like you wanted to just sit down and eat chips and dips for dinner? This is eggs and gelatin, precious friends. Both things that on a carnivore diet you can feel absolutely good about eating. If you don't want to do sweetener, I got you covered with that too. And if you don't want to do any plant material at all, you can just do Parmesan cheese and Greek yogurt or sour cream. Yeah, you can completely make this carnivore. But the point is, they're light, they're crispy, they're delicious. And you can have chips and dips for dinner. Well, that's it, my precious friends. Thank you so much for being patient and for joining me today. This is going to be a little bit of a long one because there's a lot of steps, but the good thing is these things keep wrapped up real well in a airtight container. If you get them all the way dry and crispy, they'll last for a good week. And I did find out that these little crepe things, you can make a whole crap load of these and freeze them. They freeze and thaw excellently well. So you can make a whole bunch of those. You can cut some of them up for noodles. You can cut some of them up for chips. They are going to go so far in keeping you on track on your carnivore journey and making your carnivore diet so much more rich and varied. I love you all. Thank you once again for being patient with me while I went through my life stuff. And it will be way sooner that I speak to you again. I love you all. Peace, love, and meat. And I will, I promise, talk to you again soon. Bye.